Alright guys, I'm going to show you 3 ways that you can do the Orton effect in Photoshop, and you can go ahead and pick the best one that works for you. Alright, before we start, did you know the Orton effect used to be called the Orton slide sandwich? I didn't know that. Anyway, so here we are in Photoshop. So I'm going to show you the first method that you will find most of the time if you were to do a search on YouTube. This is the method that you'll find probably around 90% of the time. So basically, it first starts off with duplicating your background layer, Command J. From there, you come in, Filter, Blur, Gaussian Blur. And quite often people will say you should be blurring your image to around the pixel or megapixel value of your camera. If you want to do that, fine. For me personally, I just pick a blur that I think looks good. So with this example, I'm going to probably pick round in the 20s. I'm going to click OK. So this is the method that you'll see most of the time. Then what they do is they come in Image, Adjustments, Brightness, Contrast, and it's a variation of playing with these. Click OK, come down and basically apply the blur amount to your image, add a mask and paint in and out the effect as you see appropriate. So for me personally, if you came in and you're with your brush tool and you're painting here, 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 over here, down here. Now, if you're looking at your image and you think, you know what, I don't actually like the blur amount, or I think I might have adjusted the contrast and brightness too hard. How do you go and change that now? Like it's been, your brightness and contrast has been hard embedded into your new layer. So the only option you got is to delete it and start again. So a better approach to this would be Command J. Come in, Filter, Blur, Gaussian Blur, click OK. Now instead of coming up and doing your adjustment hardwired into your image, use your adjustment layers. Come down, Brightness, Contrast, hold down your Option key, click on it, so it's basically it turns into a clipping bar, so it's only applied to that layer. Now come in and make your adjustments. Then come down to this layer and set your opacity to 0 and then build it up. Now the whole idea of doing the Orton effect as well is to basically target the areas that are brighter in your image. So instead of just coming down and adding a mask and then painting it in and out, let's do it smartly. So I'm going to click on my bottom layer, come into my channels, hold down my Command key, click on my RGB channel, come back into my layers, then on my Gaussian blur layer, I'm going to hit Create New Mask. And now what it's done is loaded in a Lights 1 luminosity mask. So now it's applying the Gaussian blur and your brightness and contrast to the brighter areas in your image. So now before, after, it's a little bit more subtle. So this is where you could build up your opacity if you wanted to. So now let's say if you wanted to kick this up another notch and you're like, well, I want it to be a little bit warmer. No problem. Come down to your adjustment layers, grab color balance, again, turn that into a clipping mask, which it has, and now just play with and add warmth into your image. Play with a bit of your yellow, in your midtones, and in your highlights. Before, after. So I think that's quite nice. So let's get rid of that. Let's do another method. Again, we're going to come in, Command J, duplicate our background layer. Filter, Blur, Gaussian Blur. We'll just keep this on the same amount. Click OK. Now come down, grab your curve, and make your curve adjustment. Adding brightness and contrast into your image. Turn that into a clipping mask as well. Come down, set your opacity to 0 and then build it up. Around 20. Then what you do is you change the blend mode of this layer from normal to screen. So if I just preview that for you, come into normal, screen. Now from here, you can do the same process again. Come down onto your background layer, Command click RGB, layers, click on your top layer and apply your mask. So now if you preview that, it's a little bit more subtle, but you're using the blending mode of screen. So again, it really does depend on the kind of image that you got, where one method might work better than the other, or you might change your blend modes from screen to multiply, or just other ones. Another one I like is to do luminosity, But again, it's just all comes down to personal preference. And this is why it's good to have these sort of things in your toolbox. So if you apply one, it doesn't really give you that look, so then you can just do it another way. Again, you could come down, like with the last example, come in with your color balance, and then just make some fine adjustments to adding additional warmth into your file. Okay, so we'll get rid of these. Now this is the method that I personally use just because I like to be able to have far more control over my image. Command J, duplicate your background layer. Now before you head out and start to do the Gaussian blur, right click, convert to smart object. So now as a smart object, we can come in, filter, Gaussian blur, bring our level to where it was before, click OK. So now it comes in here as in your layers palette with its own smart filter, and it's come as Gaussian blur. So you double click this and I can make the adjustment, click OK. Well, I go, nope, I don't like that. I'm going to bring it back to where it was before, click OK, and it changes back again. So now I can come in, I set my opacity to 0 and build it up. Now, like before, as we went in, we added contrast into the image. Yep, no problem. Or then we added the color balance and applied warmth. Or you could do so many other adjustments, but then you're going to have all these adjustment layers sitting above your image. But what really has all those sort of adjustments is a camera raw filter. Filter, camera raw filter. So now in camera raw, we can come in and we can add the warmth into the image that we like. Then we can come in and we can add contrast. We can add more brightness. You can then add a bit more vibrancy into your image. Then click OK. And now that's being applied. But then imagine if you're going through editing and you're like, maybe I've done that too much. Double click and you're back into your camera raw filter. Make your adjustments as necessary, then click OK and it converts back into camera raw. So again, with this, now what we can do is we can come in onto our background layer, command click on our RGB, come into layers, come onto the top layer, apply our mask, and now we have that effect. And then you can just build up your opacity as you like. And again, I don't think either one of these is probably better than the other. I do like this method here, which I've used for years, where it just gives you that control over adjusting it. Nothing's hardwired into the actual file itself. So there's no backtracking to make adjustments. So I'm gonna come into this image here and I'm just gonna show you how that method works really, really well. Okay, so with this image again, Command J, right click, convert to smart object, filter, blur, Gaussian blur. Because it's a bit more of a higher res, this is a digital panoramic stitch, so it's a bit high res, so click OK. I'm going to come into my camera raw filter, increase my exposure a little bit, add some warmth in there, add some vibrancy, add some contrast. Then I'm going to click OK. I'm going to come in, change my opacity from 0, and then just build it up. I'm going to come down to my background layer, into my channels, command click on the RGB channel to load in a lights one luminosity mask, click back onto my Gaussian blur layer and click the new mask icon. So there we have this nice effect. It's coming in with a nice glow through here. Got some nice glowing here on the right hand side, but I might just increase it. Just because if I go to 100, you can really see how that glow and just that really sort of misty atmosphere really comes in. But I'm just going to bring it back to about 50%. Just toggle the effect before and after. So it's sort of made my water a little bit too glowy. So I'm going to come into my smart filters, B for my brush tool, painting at 40%. And I'm just going to dial back the Orton effect in this area. And any other areas that you think it might be too much, dial it back. Because this is one of those effects where, especially with a scene like this, aside from the other one, where the Orton effect really is making that sort of almost like that Lord of the Rings sort of look up through the top there. It's adding nice glow on the right hand side, but it did pop our water too much. So what we can do as well is we can just come in and click on our mask now. And we can just come in and paint through, just say 30%. And we can just reduce some of the brightness in there. So then we get more of our water detail back, just in case of you just adding that extra contrast and brightness sort of starts to make your white water look a little bit clipped, then it's going to hurt your image. So then you've just got the power of these masks here for control and refinement. And then you got your smart object that you can come in and you can make localized adjustments where you need it, fine tune it. And then you can come in, if you think your Gaussian blurs off, you can come in and readjust that as well. So it does give you a lot of refined control to editing your shot. And one thing to really finish this off, I come in Command J, and if you haven't already done like a local area contrast adjustment, I find it's really nice to do it actually under your Orton Effect, Filter, Sharpen, Unsharp Mask. If you look at our fern down here, got my amount at 35% at a radius of 3.3. And it just adds that little bit of contrast in the background with the Orton Effect coming through. So that's the 3 methods of how you can apply the Orton Effect in Photoshop. It's not the only 3 ways. Certainly the first way is probably the most popular, but it's like I showed you, try not to embed your adjustment into your image. Always use adjustment layers, so you've got that opportunity to go back and fine tune it. Apply a Light Swan luminosity mask to the Gaussian blur layer, so it is targeting those sort of highlights. And if you want to have more control over adding color to your image, I'll leave a link to that video right here, and I'll see you in the next tutorial.